Hello all my YouTube data people. In today's video we are going over a very exciting update that Power BI just released in their October 2023 release of Power BI Desktop. We are going over calculation groups coming into Power BI Desktop. So calculation groups have been a thing. You've always been able to do them within DAX. It's just you've needed to do them through tabular editors. So if you know about how to edit a tabular model, you have been able to do calculation groups, but not very user-friendly, not everybody's cup of tea. So they just released the ability to do it through desktop now. So a lot easier, a lot more basic. So we're going to be going into what they are, what they do, how you can set them up, and how they are just incredibly powerful. It can just totally elevate your development as you get going with Power BI. So let's take a look at exactly what they do to start out with. So let's say we've got just a base measure here, right? So we've just got a sum on a column. So we're just going to take a total value, total sum of our orders field, and just put it onto a matrix table. And so what these calculation groups do is they allow you to essentially take this measure that is on your visual and break it out into any number of measures that you put in the group. So if you always use some certain time intelligence measures like last month, last year, year over year, month over month calculations, you can put it into a calculation group, and then any measure you want to break out into those calculations, you can do so with just drag and dropping the calculation group instead of having to create all of those new measures, right? So with just me having this field, this new calculation group field on the visual, this base measure of sum automatically calculates all of those other calculations. Right, so it's incredibly powerful because now if I just want to switch this up to, let's say we want to say the count of sales and let's do average sale value. Right, so now we can have every single one, let's clear it up a bit. So now we can have all of these different measures with only creating the base measure. We don't need to keep building and building and building on top of different measures. We only need the base measures, and then you can just build out a calculation group to get all of those calculations that you need and just break them out like that. Right, so incredibly powerful stuff with these calculation groups. So that's what the use case is for them. Let's even add some different context here. Let's go with company name and employee division, right? So you can keep going, right? It doesn't stop with just measures. You can keep putting your model. Your model can still work at play as normal, and then again, all of those calculations just work with themselves, right? So the sales division, here's how they've been performing year over year, and here's how each of those clients year over year have been performing. It's incredible what these calculation groups can do. All right, so that's what they can do. Let's get into how we create them. So before we can create calculation groups, what we are going to need to do is, this is still a preview function within Power BI, right? So you do need to go ahead and turn it on. After you install the October 2023 update of Power BI Desktop, we need to go ahead and turn on the feature that will allow us to work with calculation groups. So let's just start on a blank page here and go to File, and then we're going to go to Options and Settings, and Options, and then in the Global Options settings, under the Preview Features, we're going to click on that, and we're going to want to enable, to make sure the checkbox is clicked on, Model Explorer and Calculation Group Authoring. All right, so there's that calculation groups that we're looking for. Just go ahead and click that on, press OK. You might need to restart your Power BI desktop. Once you set that up, go ahead and restart it. And then once you have got that checked off, Power BI reset, now you can go ahead and open up a model file and click onto the model view page. So looking at our model real quick, very basic model, employees, product, clients, bunch of lookup tables with a date table, and then just a basic fact table, right? So very basic model, super easy to work with. And so what we now want to do is, so what we just checked off is we now have the ability to see the semantic model within Power BI Desktop. Another amazing update from the October release, incredible stuff. What we want to do on this data pane model tab is, if you want to poke through this, you can see kind of how this looks, but not the focus of this video. So we're just going to be focusing on the calculation groups. So up here in this model tab, you now have this new thing that you've never seen before in Power BI Desktop, calculation groups. They are incredible. So if you go ahead and just right click that, let's go to new calculation group. And so we are going to be creating that same, we're just going to start with that same kind of example to start with, that time intelligence one. So we're going to create those same 8 or 10 different measures. And then that will be our calculation group here. And we'll show each of those measures, how they're created, and then again, just putting them on the page again, just show you how it ties all together. So once you've created the calculation group, let's go ahead and rename it. So it automatically gets generated with a table. So what the calculation group does is it generates a table now. So essentially you're able to now create measures that will generate a field on a table, which again, just another incredible benefit of these calculation groups is you can essentially have field measures now, which totally change how you can filter and do bookmarking with reports. It's amazing. So these calculation groups, once they've created, it'll create that table. So it'll create a table, and then within the table, there's going to be a field, a single field where your calculation items will be calculated. And I'll go through kind of what I mean by that in a minute, but so just, this is a table now. Very similar to just all of your imported tables, right? If you hover over it, you can see it's got the storage mode of import. So it's a physical table in your model now that this calculation is creating, and then a field, a single column within that calculation group that we're going to build on our calculation items. Sorry, so let's go ahead and rename this table to time intelligence calculations. Oh, where'd you go? Did I spell it right? Nope. Calculations. All right. So now that is renamed. Let's go ahead and rename the field as well. Go ahead and name this just time intelligence. All right. So now let's go ahead and create that calculation item. So let's go ahead and right click on it or click on those 3 dots and go to new calculation item. And so once we click on that new calculation item, you're essentially going to get the same formula bar that you're used to when you're creating a measure. So again, what we're creating here on this calculation group is you're creating DAX measures still, but you're working with the selected measure that you put on that visual. So remember how we started out the video, right? You have a base measure that you put on, and then you include the calculation group field on the visual, and the calculation group DAX is using all of these selected measure functions, which is using that base function that you have on that original, on the original table, and it is breaking that selected measure out. So that total sales, count of sales, total employees, total clients, right? It's taking that original measure that you have on your visual, and then it's going to apply all of the other syntax that we're going to give it, right? So all of those other time series calculations that you saw that were happening is what's happening within this DAX calculation, right? And so what we want to do first is let's first just have just a current value, right? So it's going to just equal the selected measure so we know what our current value is, right? So let's just name that one current. And then after current, let's go ahead with, I like to do rolling calculations like rolling 30, rolling 7 days, right? So let's go ahead and just drop a rolling 7-day calculation on there as well. So let's go calculate. Again, we're going to use selected measures on all of our calculate statements for these. So these calculation groups are always going to use the selected measure is what we're always going to be calculating. And then if we can even start filtering on other calculation items that we create once we start creating them, right? So calculation items essentially act as a variable as well within Power BI, right? So within DAX, within your DAX calculations, whenever you're creating a variable, they kind of calculate top to bottom, right? So variables calculate top to bottom, and calculation groups work exactly the same, right? So we'll get into kind of how calculation groups calculate in a minute, but it's a very similar concept, right? So they're all going to calculate top to bottom. So if you want to reference a measure from within your calculation group to build on top of that calculation group's measure, you can. It just has to be after the one you want to build on top of, right? So it will, again, we'll definitely get into it and show you what that means. But again, those variables, you can keep building onto all of these calculation groups. You can keep going with it. So this rolling 7, you can filter it down to something specific with this measure in mind. Again, it's incredible. So all right, let's keep going with a couple more here. So that was the rolling time frame one. Let's go with a last month and last year. Let's go last month, calculate. Again, selected measure, of course. Let's go date add. Minus 1 month for last month. Let's grab you and go one more for last year. Let's go last year, and instead of date add, let's just do same period last year, just for fun, to show you guys how many options there are with different functions to use. So we've got last year, we've got last month, and then now let's do some growth measures on top of these two guys. So let's go month over month growth. So we first need to get the difference between the current value or the selected measure and the last month's value, which is going to be current month or current value. So we don't need to select the current value measure, right? Current within our calculation group is just selected measure. So we're going to do current selected measure minus the last month value. And then this is how you reference one of your previous items in a calculation group, right? So we're going to calculate, again, we're calculating the selected measure, even if we're referencing a previous measure in our group. We're not just going to filter, we can't just specify to current, right? If I just type calculate current, nothing comes up, right? This isn't a measure to call from. So the way that you call these previous calculation items is, again, you still use that calculate selected measure, and then here is where we're going to, again, how I referenced that this is a table, right? This is a table with a field. We need to select this table and field and then filter it down to our calculation item. So we will use the time intelligence calculations table using the time intelligence field, and we will have that equal the name that we want to reference, right? So we are going with last month here, right? Yeah, last month, month over month. So we will go with last month there, and then we'll close that one out. So then again, this is taking that current value and then subtracting it from the previous month's value to get that month over month difference in what the base measure is that we're calculating. And then let's go ahead with another one for year over year. But this name is, we are referencing the last year calculation item. And now let's go ahead and do the percentage growth rates. So not just the difference in value, but let's go ahead and do an actual growth rate value between these two month over month growths and year over year. So let's go month over month growth rate. We are going to use the divide function. Again, let's calculate selected measure. And then again, using that same type of filtering on a calculate statement, we will go time intelligence table using time intelligence field, filtering down to, which one was this one last month? Month over month, yes. Month over month. So we're taking the difference divided by our last month for a growth rate. All right. There is that one. And let's get the yearly growth rate done. Year over year growth. And this one is going to be not the month over month item, but the year over year. And this is going to be last year. All of the rest can stay the same. And then another couple of other ones that I just want to show on here, just for some extra benefit to how powerful these calculation groups can be, are cumulative values. So again, you can just easily take the cumulative and last year cumulative values so easily with these calculation groups. It is crazy. Let's go calculate selected measure, and our cumulative function table date is less than or equal to our next date table date context. All right, there's our base cumulative, and then for our last year, essentially same type of concept here. We will just, so again, even if we want to reference a previous function, right? So we want to reference the last year calculation item and then get the cumulative value of that calculation item. We just have to still use that selected measure value because we still want to calculate on that base function. So we're using that selected measure, and then we're going to filter the table down, that time intelligence table down, to what we want it on, which is going to be last year's value. So we're doing cumulative last year, and then we will keep this cumulative filtering statement applied, right? Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and let's get an error to show here real quick. This is on last year. Perfect. All right, so now let's go ahead and drop our matrix on the table here, and let's go month and year. And let's see if our calculation table is working and formatted how we want it. Let's go total value, right? So that is working. And then let's drop our, right? So then now you can see, now we've got this time intelligence table, right? So this is now going to be our calculation table. And again, it's a table. So it's not up here with the calculation or with the measure groups, but it's a table. It does have a different icon though. And there we go. Let's go here. Last year. All right. Perfect. So now you can see that once we drop that, again, that field from our time intelligence table calculation group, you can see that all of those calculations that we just made on those calculation groups, that whole grouping right here, is now applied to our base measure, right? So that selected measure is being applied to that total value of the order, so that sales value. And again, you can just add different measures on here. Let's go there. Let's go client count. Let's go average orders. All right, so now you can again see just all of those calculations can be done for you just like that. I guess our clients are pretty consistent all across the table, but our table can easily kind of break out all of those measures with just a simple calculation group. All you need is just a calculation group with some base measures, and you have just skyrocketed the value of your reports and what you can publish in your model. Because now if you publish this to the model, anybody else that gets connected to this model, even if they have a very limited knowledge of Power BI, you can just tell them to do this same type of thing, and now they have all of these measures too. They don't need to know how to create a last year measure, how to create a rolling measure, how to create a month-over-month measure, and you don't need to worry about creating all 15 of these different measures and putting them on your base model. You just need to do the calculation group, apply it, let everybody know how to use it, and voila. So next thing I want to cover is you can see that these growth measures do not mean anything, right? They are in the wrong format because by base, the base format of all of the calculation groups for your measures is going to be the format of the measure that you use, right? So this is currently a currency format. If we make this a percent format, you can see that all of these will change to a percent, right? So what we want to do is you can do dynamic formatting within your measure group or within your calculation items. So let's go over to our growth rates. We want to apply a dynamic format string. So let's go ahead and turn that guy on. And then in here, once you turn that on, you can again see we're going to get a little formula bar, very similar to that measure bar. And then over here on the left is going to be a little drop down where you can select the item or the format, right? On the other items where you don't have dynamic formats, you don't have that, right? But then on that dynamic format string enabled, you do have the drop down. So let's go ahead to format. And this is going to be a percentage. So let's just go ahead. I want 2 decimals. So 0 dot dot with the percentage sign. And same thing on our year-over-year growth. Inside the quotes, 0.00 with a percentage sign. And now when we hop back over, voila, our growth is now in a percentage value with everything else showing as the base value. Maybe. It's going to do it. Let's drop you in again. There you go. Clean that up a bit. Maybe. Power BI is being weird today. All right, you get the point. I don't know where these decimals are going, but they all end up being the same base value, and then you can still format dynamically if you need to. Let's switch this up to count of sales, make it look prettier. There we go. All right, that's nice and pretty. But all right, so that's calculation groups. Again, so powerful, so incredibly powerful. Oh, actually, the last thing. So remember how I said that they are a table now, right? So these measures, again, this measure is technically a table. So if you want to filter by something on these measures now, you can do that, right? Like all of your items, if you want to just, again, have an entire report built on some of these measures, you only need those base measures, and then you can filter down the table to whatever those measures you want shown are, right? So if you just want a visual to just show yearly cumulative growth difference on an area chart, you can have. You don't need to do that. Again, nobody needs to know how to do these cumulative values other than the person creating that calculation group. Make that calculation group, have them filter down to the cumulative value, throw it on a visual. Let's switch this up to a area visual, month and year, count of sales. There you go. So you got the month and year by the count of sales, and let's make this one boom and boom, right? So now you can easily just throw those two items onto one visual without anybody knowing how to do it. It's so nice. It's genuinely incredible. But all right, so that is going to be it for calculation groups. Hopefully you guys find some value in these guys. They are just ridiculously incredible. Past just kind of the time intelligence stuff, you can go so deep into it if you need to identify your top performing clients by some specific designation, like something being added in a specific date range. They get some designation, some activity happening, they get another designation. You can do all of that within a calculation group now and just publish it out, and then anybody connected to that model will just, boom, all of their measures are now in that same exact definition that your company uses for that same designation. Again, just incredible value in those calculation groups. But hopefully you guys found that helpful. I will see you guys on the next one, and let me know if you found it helpful, and see you guys later.